And there is a recording in progress. So yeah, as you might know, you all are here in person, but we do have a virtual component. So we do have some friends here that are online as well. So I'll be fielding the chat, making sure if they have any questions. But if you have any questions as well, I have my wonderful intern, Isabel, over here, who can get you note cards, pens, something like that, in order for you to write down your questions as they might be able to come up for you. So I'm going to start by introducing our speakers here today. Going to go down the line. So we have Gretchen Rydin. She is Littleton City Council at-large seat. We have Candace Moon, who is with the Centennial City Council, District 1, and is my council member. We have Senator Jeff Bridges from Senate District 26. Representative Ortiz from House District 38. We have Kelly Milliman from Littleton City Council, District 4. And last but not least, Steve Barr from District 3 for Littleton City Council. All right, so we have the note cards for questions, because I please do ask that you try to remain as quiet as you can during this so we can hear our speakers, and also so that the people who are on the Zoom can also hear as well. But so we'll be starting with some introductions. Oh, well, we just started with that, but our speakers will be giving about a 3-minute talking points about why they're here, what this is all about. And so we'll be kicking off with Steve Barr.
For showing up and attending. Since I'm the one that's starting this whole thank you so much. Since I'm the one that's starting this whole discussion, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you all coming out and showing interest in our in housing. It is not the most glamorous of topics. It is full of contention. It is full of a lot of opinions as to what's the best way, the right way to do housing. But I just want to applaud Representative Ortiz and Senator Bridges for bringing us all together and honestly putting some money behind this at the State House. Because we here in Littleton, we are facing housing challenges that are similar to, but yet distinct from a lot of the other municipalities in the Denver metro area. And I want to say that I think the things that we're going to be talking about today with regards to the state revolving loan fund, with the innovative housing grant programs, other financing mechanisms, it is going to give us the flexibility, being on city council and being a small municipality in the Denver metro area, to look at different options that fit our community, options that people really like to live next to, but also achieves the goals of trying to make housing more affordable, more accessible, and honestly, to reach a broader array of citizens in our city. Something I'm personally passionate about is making sure our school district, it's kind of the jewel of both Littleton and Centennial. I want to make sure that survives into the future. And if you've heard me talk on the subject before, we are having a hard time getting more kids into our school. And when we start losing kids in our school, we start losing funding for those schools. And when we start losing funding for those schools and the quality of the education decreases, we will start seeing distinct deficits, not only in our quality of life, but as well as your property values. So it is incumbent upon all of us to start looking for these options for young families, for our aging population as well. I know my parents had to go far outside of the city to find a place where my mom could actually have a place where she could actually live because her knees were so bad. She can't, get up and downstairs all that easily anymore, and had to, essentially move 45 minutes away just to find a place that, was accessible to her. So the housing needs are broad, and we need to be tackling them not just from a person-to-person perspective because it's the right thing to do, but economically for our city. I thought that was pretty funny too. So I don't know where I'm at on 3 minutes, but I'm personally invested in seeing a lot of this money coming out of our State House going to projects here in Littleton. And we're going to look for the best ways, the most applicable ways for that to happen that fit what our city needs.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for including me in this important conversation today. I have the unique opportunity to serve as the liaison to South Metro Housing Options, which is our city's housing authority, and I also serve on our housing task force. I fully understand and recognize and see firsthand the continuing challenges this community faces with regards to lack of housing, and it's not a pretty picture. I recently spoke with Maureen Shannon, she's director of North Littleton Promise, and with Catherine Roy of Love Inc. about what they're hearing from their members. And resoundingly both stated that housing, or specifically unstable housing, is the #1 stressor and concern for their members. Unstable housing is directly linked to a decline in overall health, physical and mental. And the children are the ones who suffer the most from this instability. We can change the narrative of this story. Making housing happen is extraordinarily hard work, with obstacles and hurdles all along the way. There's funding issues, financing issues, land use decisions, and unfortunately, there's a loud chorus that we sometimes hear of not in my backyard, no more growth, and no more density. One recent project I'd like to mention that will finally break ground this summer is the 51 housing units that South Metro Housing Options will be building for income restricted residents. This development is going to provide new homes for seniors and persons with disabilities. South Metro had to jump through hoops and over hurdles for years with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and with the City of Littleton's land use decisions or processes. What is unbelievable is that South Metro Housing Options owned this land, but despite those challenges, they continue to work tirelessly to make this development happen. The City of Littleton adopted our most recent comprehensive plan in October of 2019. Perhaps some of you were part of that. This plan helps guide the vision of what our citizens want for our city, our community to be. One of the values expressed by the community was inclusion. As part of the recent update to our antiquated land use code from the 1970s, we realized that we have an opportunity to increase housing diversity stock within our community. But we need your support and our elected officials to help make this happen. Our housing task force is currently working very, very hard to craft language for an inclusionary housing ordinance. I will be supporting this ordinance, and I look forward to bringing it in front of council very soon. And I'm excited and curious to learn more about this revolving loan program that Senator Bridges and Representative Ortiz will be talking about today, as this is just another tool to help local municipalities create additional housing options. I want to thank you both for the opportunity to speak today, and I really look forward to working with you both together so we can strengthen our relationship and collectively keep the momentum moving forward. Thanks so much.
Let's give Stephen and Kelly a round of applause so far, everybody. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, we are going to have a significantly amount of time for Q&A. Please raise your hand and we'll make sure you get a note card. The reason we want to put them on note cards is in case we don't have time to get to them, or in case we have to give what I call the warrant officer answer, which is we'll get back to you. We will be able to take those note cards, keep them, and be able to get you the answer that you deserve. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Gretchen.
Hey, everybody. It is fantastic to be here today. I am here actually because of laundry. So about 3 blocks from here is a laundromat right off of Datura and Littleton in that Woodlawn shopping center. And that's where I do my laundry. I rent kind of close to here. And back in December, so only a few weeks after I'd been elected, I happened to see a neighbor there as I was doing my laundry. And she was congratulating me on city council. And when we were talking a little bit as we did our laundry, there was a gentleman next to me who was loading things into the dryer, and he had his son with him. He overheard that I was on city council. And so he pulls me aside. He says, wait, you're on city council. Remember, I've only been doing this a few weeks. So I'm like, yes, what's happening here? And he says, look, I have a problem. The window in our apartment where me and my son are, it's blown out, and we've got it boarded up right now, and the landlord is not being responsive. Can you help me? So I'm a social worker by day. So my answer is yes, absolutely. Let me get you a card. And of course I'm in yoga pants and like my puppy coat. So I don't have a business card, but I go back, I get him a card and I say, contact me, here's my information and I will see what I can do. And at this point I'm thinking, okay, what are my powers? Can I like lean on this landlord? Like, am I allowed to like throw down the gauntlet and, you know, to get him, to force him to get this window? And so I'm all excited. I'm emailing the city attorney to find out what our options are to help this gentleman and his son. Of course, I don't hear from him. Months go by. I finally hear from him maybe a month ago. And he says, I found your card and this time I'm about to be evicted. And I think the sheriff's coming. They're going to kick me out and I don't know what to do. And this is, you know, through email and we're emailing back and forth. And finally we get a phone call and I get him on the phone and he's in tears at this point. Now, social worker, I'm fine with men crying. I can sit in that with them and support him in that. He didn't know what to do. And so we do a little grounding, we do a little breathing, and then we do a little problem solving. So of course we get him linked up with Arapahoe County Department of Human Services, which has a rental program, a rental assistance program. We get him linked up with here actually at the library. There is housing assistance that's weekly that meet with people who are struggling to find out what resources are available. And then of course we get him some mental health support because not only was he struggling with rent, but he also had lost his job because of COVID. He had his own business. He was cleaning houses and that was gone. His wife had left him and he was left with custody of his son. And so it's overwhelming at that point. And I'm here today because this has to be a regional approach. This isn't just something the city can do. This is something the county can do. This is something the state can do. And as you'll hear, there's some things the federal government can do as well to address this so we can really help this guy. And it needs to be all of us doing it because individuals matter. And that's where I think the success will be.
Thank you, Gretchen, for that touching story. And that is so often how it happens because housing is a very personal thing for everybody. We all need shelter. So Centennial started in April 2021, looking at housing in the city. And I just want to share some of the things that we found out. One of the things we found out was that 70% of the housing in the city of Centennial is on the west side, which borders Littleton and Greenwood Village. And interestingly enough, only 2% of the housing is in what we call our central area, which is starting at Holly on Dry Creek and spreading out east. So when we found these things out, we started looking more and we realized that we had a very non-diverse housing stock in Centennial. We had 80% of housing was single family. We only had 7%, 9% housing for single family, multi, or rental property. So just looking at those numbers, you can see that Centennial has always been this suburban community for homes and catered to that. The market catered to those people. Well, now, those people, of which I'm one, and I'll be honest, we're sitting in our big family homes, but our children can't afford to live in Centennial. We can't find a place to move to. We want to stay in Centennial, all of us in our big family homes, because there's no place to go. So we have a bit of a predicament in Centennial, but we're working on it. And one of the things that we've done this spring, not spring, it was actually this winter, we applied for a matching DOLA grant. We hired a consultant because in situations like this, it's really necessary to get the facts of what is happening in the community before we start to make decisions. And we also recognize that the people who support our community, who raise our children, our teachers, the police officers who support our community, the firemen, they cannot afford to live in Centennial, and we refer to them collectively as the missing middle, because we have no affordable housing for those people who directly impact our city. So we realized too, when we took the DOLA grant, it was a council decision to do that because we knew that if we didn't adopt a policy, there would be no funding for the city of Centennial from DOLA. So one of the things we're looking at is we're talking about redoing part of our land development code. We're looking at incentives for builders to come and build homes that are attainable, whether they're apartments or single family or town hall. I mentioned we're looking at the LDC because we're realizing that having an ADU on a property can help for people who have parents living at home or adult children who want to have that experience of still having their own place to live, that if their property can allow it, they could oftentimes think about building an ADU or some type of additional dwelling unit for those family members. We're also working with the county on issues. We have not had a huge number of homeless people in Centennial. We have tried to make sure, though, that we have a program in place. So when our contract law enforcement with Arapahoe County does come across someone who is camping out, that they are getting a place to stay that night. It's not just give them a ticket and move them on. We're trying to actually get them a place to stay and have the county assist them. We realize we need to be more active in that. Gretchen, your story of meeting this gentleman in the laundromat who was in an unstable situation, that's where we want to get to so that we don't have people who all of a sudden are out and about. One of the things that happened in our community is that we realized, it was brought to our attention through a community-based organization, that we had children at an elementary school in Centennial we found were not getting food. They had housing instability. And when that was brought to our attention, we started working to make sure that those situations were corrected, that the schools as well as the county were aware and they could get services to those people. So I keep saying those people, and I hate that, but we've got to stop saying those people. And this is all of our problem. This is all of our problem. But we have to reach out and we have to help. And Centennial has been in a bedroom of Denver for a long time just because of the size and how it was formed. But we are recognizing our identity and living up to it. And we are working on getting better housing, but we're going to do this in a methodical way because we're 21 years old this fall in September. We have to have our resources. We don't have the history and the framework that the cities of Littleton and Sheridan and Inglewood and Greenwood Village have. So we're basically having to find our way to do this. We do have a program going on right now that if you live in Centennial, I ask you to get involved in. It's online at our website. We're taking community engagement for housing. We want to hear what our residents need for housing and what our residents think that we can do to improve our housing situation. So I ask you to please go to our website. This is our community engagement of asking people for their opinion about the housing in Centennial.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. It is just delightful to be in a room filled with humans again. It has been far too long, and to see everyone's smiling faces, some very interested faces, not smiling, concerned because housing is a big deal, but it's great to see everyone's full faces in this room. This is a fantastic experience that as a politician, I feed off this kind of stuff and I have missed it over the last few years. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm State Senator Jeff Bridges, actually grew up here in the area. I think the last time that I was at this museum, I was 8, and it was a 3rd grade field trip from Franklin. And so it is so cool to see that this place is still going. I had no idea actually where it was. And so to have this event here today, now I can sort of geographically place it in my adult map of South Metro Denver. So it's great to be here in this location. Grew up here, went to Littleton Public Schools K through 12, worked for Ken Salazar in the US Senate, where I handled military and small business policy. And I have a Master's of Divinity degree, which is a very unique qualification for a member of the legislature. There's 2 of us now, was just me for a while, but there's 2 of us now. And we're both Democrats, interestingly enough. Studying divinity, I think that the work of it was a really interreligious and really diverse place that I went to. It was all about finding shared values, finding common ground and bringing folks together. And that's what we do in the legislature. That is the job. It is about finding that common ground, bringing folks together and doing good things for the people of this state. And I've been doing that since 2016 when I was elected to the State House, House District 3. And 2 years later, filled a vacancy committee appointment to fill at the end of Daniel Kagan's term, following the incredible Senator Linda Newell and the 8 years that she had in the Senate. So that's the seat I'm in. It is an honor to not fill your shoes, but to follow in your footsteps. So thank you for all the great work that you've done, Senator Newell. And when people ask me, what are your priorities for this year? My answer is affordability. Top 3 are affordability, write this down. And then the third one, very importantly, is affordability. We have an incredibly strong economy here in Colorado, but that doesn't mean that people aren't struggling. And even people who you would think should feel financially secure in today's Colorado are financially insecure. They're housing insecure. They don't know. They don't know if their job is going to continue or how their kids are going to live in the area. There's been so much disruption over the last few years. And as we're coming back into a strong economy, housing affordability is a key piece of what it is that folks are worried about. And luckily, something that we can address this year because of all the funding that we have received from the federal government through ARPA funds. So what is housing? What does housing affordability look like? Well, across Colorado, half of Coloradans who are paying rent, so people that are renting, half of Coloradans paying rent spend more than 1/3 of their income on rent. We call that cost burden. We don't think, if you look at an average budget, we say 1/3 of your budget is basically what you should be spending on rent. Half of Coloradans are spending more than that. And 1/3 of Coloradans are spending more than 50% of their income on rent. That's crazy. That is something that is mirrored here in the Denver metro area as well. And it's not just true for folks on the lower end of the economic scale. If you look at people that are making 100% of AMI, that's area median income. So people right down the middle, your average working class family. In the Denver metro area, 1/3 of those folks are spending more than 1/3 of their income on rent. So this is a statewide problem, and it is also a Denver metro problem. And so, what is that? What's the challenge there? If you have people making 100% of area median income, if you look at 80 to 120% of AMI in the Denver metro area, there are actually fewer units year over year that are available to rent in that price range. So it's not just that fewer units are built for people making between 80 and 120% AMI. It's not that there are fewer units available for working class families or that there are fewer units being built for those folks. Their total number of units available for those folks to rent goes down year over year. They're pulled off the market, rehabbed, and priced way out of those folks' range. Luxury condos, you're seeing those go up all over the place because you can make a lot of money building those. But what we're not seeing is building for folks making between 80 and 120% AMI. And so that is the focus, because if you're making 40% AMI and you're competing for rent against someone who makes 80% AMI, guess who's going to get that unit? Person making more money is going to get that unit. They're going to be paying more. They probably should, but having a lack of affordable workforce housing means that folks on the economic margins, folks that are lower income, struggle even more because places that they should be living are being taken by people making 80 to 120% AMI. So that is why addressing those folks in the middle is, to me, the most important thing we can do for folks across the income spectrum across Colorado. And because we have that ARPA money, because we actually have funds this year, we can do something about it. So I fought harder to be on the interim committee on housing than I fought to be on any committee that I have ever served on, because I know this is such a challenge for folks in Colorado, and I know there's something we can do about it. And one of those things is the loan program that we're here to talk about today, that Rep. Ortiz and I are sponsoring together. And that there's the reason that I love the loan program and that I wanted to sponsor the loan program, two reasons, was the #1 recommendation from the interim housing committee. So always like to be on the #1 recommendation. The more important reason, though, is that the loan program does two really important things. It leverages funds from other sources and it recycles the funds over and over and over. So because it's a loan program, it's not a one-time spend. You invest it somewhere that pays back what it is that you've invested plus interest, which means that over time, this fund can build more and more and more and more homes. This isn't a one-time spend. And so you look at the difference that something like this can make. We're down about 200,000 affordable rental units across the state. If this builds 10,000 units over the next 5 years, and then it builds 15,000 units over the next 5 years, and then 20 after that, you're looking at a fund that in perpetuity can really, in the long term, really work to address this challenge. Now, it won't be solved by November, right? This is not a short-term fix. This is not giving folks a check in the mail. This is investing in the underlying structural challenges that we face in the state that keep us from having the affordable housing stock that we need to keep our economy going and not look like San Francisco or New York City, which I don't think any of us want to look like. So the other one is the grant fund, and I love the grant fund. It is one-time spend, but the way that it works and the reason that it works is because it incentivizes local governments. Some would say bribe, I wouldn't. It incentivizes local governments to change local zoning codes, to make the changes that only local governments can make to the way that housing can be built in their communities by saying, if you make those changes, then maybe you can get some cash to help with your housing challenges. So it is not a one-time spend to just build. It's a one-time spend to change, again, the underlying structures that are causing our housing crisis here in Colorado. And that's important because, again, this is a real struggle. You see folks that you think should be fine. A family of 3 making $100,000. You'd think they should be fine. $100,000. They're not. I challenge you to go find an affordable 2-bedroom house or affordable 2-bedroom apartment that does not cost more than 1/3 of those folks' income. We just don't have the housing inventory we need here in the metro area. And if you look across the state, you look at those resort communities, it's even worse because a lot of the homes that folks used to live in are now being bought up and turned into short-term rentals. So and because folks in the metro area can turn their vacation homes into short-term rentals, there are two things that happen because of that. One, you have more people. It's cheaper to afford that place because you're making income on it when you're not there. So you can afford a much more expensive home. And because you can afford a more expensive home, that means people that are making less money can also afford to go into mountain communities and buy homes. So you've dramatically increased the number of people that can go off and buy those homes in resort communities because they can turn them into short-term rentals. So you have different challenges across the state for why there's a lack of affordable workforce housing. But the loan fund, the grant fund, and the other things that we're doing in the state should make a meaningful and real difference in people's lives this year. Again, because we have so much money coming in from the federal government, it gives us the ability to create those structural changes that in the next 5, 10, 15 years will hopefully address the challenges that we have and make us so that we're not California, we're not New York, we're Colorado, and working class families can still keep living here.
All right, Senator Bridges, thank you so much. I also want to recognize another elected that we do have here, and that's LPS School Board Member Joan Anderson. So if you want to raise your hand and be recognized by the crowd. Great. Thanks for being here. So yeah, I like to Crayola things and do things by the number. That's just my background, having been in the military service. So that is what I'm about to do, to kind of talk about a little bit more specifics around the revolving loan program and then the other work that we're doing around affordable, attainable housing that has been led by the Democratic caucus in both the Senate and the House. So the revolving loan program is going to be looking at a total of $150 million from the general fund, from these ARPA dollars to spend and invest in affordable units. And the purpose is to provide flexible, low interest and below market rate loan funding to assist eligible recipients. Now, Senator Bridges did a great job talking about why we're seeing these luxury condos go up. Bottom line is, if you are a developer or business, what is your goal? Make money. So what this revolving loan program is, crazy, what? But what this revolving loan program is going to do is create a different set of criteria that is going to incentivize both, like under the Department of Housing, going to incentivize nonprofits and developers to work together to create projects. And since they're getting loans at below market rates with certain requirements and criteria, to build a stock of affordable, attainable housing. So that is how this is different than just your normal loan program and what's going on. It's still a loan program though, which means that this could exist in perpetuity. That is our goal. That's what we're trying to do here, is to create a fund that is sustainable and replenishes itself and is another tool in the toolbox to create affordable, attainable stock throughout the state. So it's going to be administered by the Division of Housing and or a third-party administrator of the Department of Housing's choosing. Eligible recipients are nonprofits, local governments, and for-profit developers. Again, though, like whenever people hear that, they're like, why do we need to do that? There's going to be certain criteria on them if they're going to enter in and apply for these loans. So it's not going to be the same as the developments that they're doing on their own, just to be very clear. So in order to be eligible for these loan projects, they must do one of the following: develop and integrate housing-related infrastructure, provide gap finance for housing development projects, maintain existing affordable housing, and they're going to do that through renovations. And one of there's a few hallmarks that are going to be met when they're trying to maintain this affordable stock. It's going to be around updating some of the infrastructure of the home to make sure that it's energy efficient, because we need to be mindful of what's going on with climate change as we update these homes. We're also going to be looking at accessibility. That is a big piece as well. And that's going to be significant for the aging and for those of us that live with a disability who, let's be quite frank, most of us live on a fixed income. I can speak to those that live with a disability. We are 4 times more likely to live below the poverty line. And that has everything to do with access. So when we are renovating the affordable, attainable housing stock, that is going to be something that has to be taken into consideration. And if you're making it for somebody that's in a chair, it doesn't matter whether you're 39 like me or 60, it's going to be accessible. And that's what matters. Also, another criteria is finance energy improvements in affordable housing. So I kind of already touched on that and mentioned that. The prioritization criteria is that they are located in communities that face barriers to accessing capital from traditional sources. That is an issue. Align with other state economic development efforts, create permanently affordable home ownership opportunities, are highly energy efficient or use electric space and water heating, and include units that are restricted to rental usage to persons with disabilities or seniors. So that's kind of by the numbers of what this revolving loan program is going to do, how much we're looking to spend. But this is only one tool in the toolbox that Senator Bridges was talking about. So I'm going to go by the numbers on the other bills that are coming forward. And just to give you a depth of what we're doing. So that revolving loan program we're looking at is $150 million towards just the revolving loan program. We're looking at investing structural and transformational change over $400 million in affordable, attainable housing. That is what leadership that Senator Bridges brought to the task force and the House and Senate Democrats are working on to make sure that we're making transformational change. So innovative housing incentive program, that's going to be its own bill that's going to allocate $40 million to modular, prefabricated, manufactured, and other innovative housing options. The state grants and investment, local affordable housing, we're looking at dropping $178 million towards grants and local governments and nonprofits to buy land and develop affordable housing. The CHAPA Middle Income Access Program, City Council Member Candace talked about the missing middle. This specifically addresses that. So it's looking to expand critical workforce housing for our nurses, our teachers, our police officers, our firemen and women, our first responders that protect us, that keep us safe and do the most for us. We saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic, how critical our teachers, nurses, nurse aides, fire and police that serve us are. This speaks specifically to them. It's going to be looking to fund $25 million through an access program that serves middle income families and individuals with incomes too high to qualify for low income housing tax credits. So this is working on meeting the needs of the missing middle. We're looking at the revolving loan fund investment, affordable housing. That's what we just talked about. So that's $150 million there. And then loan program, resident owned communities. That's going to be dedicating $35 million to help mobile park residents through loans and grants to buy their land and create resident-owned communities. Yeah, let's clap for that because that is a huge issue. And we do have mobile park homes here in House District 38. So as you can tell, I mean, everyone, let's give Senator Jeff Bridges and the task force a round of applause, please. Because we are being strategic, we are being transformational, and we're being very directed in the ways that we are trying to use this money. We're not, I know we can tend to have a reputation of just trying to throw money at the problem. No, this is very directed to create long-term structural and transformational change so we can clamp down, increase the stock, clamp down on the prices of housing. Like I am gonna start a family here. When my kids grow up, if they wanna live here, probably not because I'm a little bit of a hard, you know what. But if they do want to move back, I want them to choose to move back. And I'm sure there's a lot of you with kids that want to move back. When I first moved here, and I'll go ahead and date myself and own a little bit, I was able to find my home for $185. And that was in 2014. You will never find that here again. So a disabled veteran coming out of the military, trying to medically retire, be close to Craig Hospital, these are the criteria I was looking at. And this community welcomed me with open arms. They couldn't settle here. And that makes me sad. It breaks my heart. So this is what this team here, from city council members through state, through federal, is trying to do to make sure we address the housing issue. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop it there because I really wanna leave some time for question and answer and for us to engage and interact. This is my favorite part of a town hall. And this is actually my first in-person town hall since being elected that I've gotten to do. So it's so great to see your faces here. I know, right? That's crazy. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass this back to Austin. Some of you were gracious enough to email questions to us ahead of time. We did try and do our homework, so he's gonna go ahead and read those questions first. And we're gonna read the answers that we came up with and then allow anyone on the panel to also answer that. And then we'll go into the note cards that we received, so.
Sounds great. Thank you again to our speakers. Really appreciate that. So our first question that we have is from Bob Epstein, and the question is simply, are there any specific areas in Colorado that are being targeted?
Okay, so the answer that we came up with was some of these bills specifically focus on communities disproportionately impacted by COVID, workforce, race, disability, accessibility to transportation. Ultimately a statewide effort. It's a statewide effort and does not focus on a region. In these bills though is built the flexibility, as Senator Bridges talked about, to meet regional needs. We're talking about some of those tourist mountain towns. The needs of those towns are not going to be the same as Littleton and Centennial, is not going to be the same as the Eastern Plains or the Western Slope. So there are communities that we are targeting, but make no doubt that we are trying to impact transformational change across the state. So if anybody else wants to piggyback off of that and
Yeah, just real quick on that. We had a lot of folks come with very specific ideas to the task force over the summer. And rather than have a $5 million bill for this and a $10 million bill for this, we created two really big buckets, the loan program and the grant program, with a couple of other initiatives on the side, but those are really flexible. And it is all about getting good ideas from across the state, whatever those challenges are. I mean, in Lamar, one of the challenges that I heard from the reps from that area are that the cost of building a home is actually more than how much you can sell it for after you build it. Can you imagine? And so the challenge is, again, just very, very different across the state. And so we wanted flexibility built into these programs to make sure that everybody across the entire state was able to benefit from it.
All right. Our next question came from Bill Hopper. Can the financing provide incentives for increasingly dense housing, which is essential for the environment?
Great. So the answer that we put together was House Bill 22-1304, page 21, line 17. You can look that up on your own, but again, we want to be as specific as possible. All right. Describes how the multi-agency group in the bill shall encourage the involvement of local governments and to develop a list of sustainable land use best practices, one of which is to include zoning for mixed use, higher density developments in downtown areas of municipalities around transit stations. I think I also addressed how in the revolving loan program, one of the targets is if we're going to be refurbishing these affordable attainable units to keep them affordable attainable, how we're going to make sure we prioritize energy efficiency. So that's just one of the different ways that this is being baked into not just that we are transformational around affordable, attainable housing, but making sure we are tending to one of our greatest resources right after our citizenry, which is our environment. So anybody else want to piggyback off that?
Thank you, Representative Ortiz. I just want to let you know that when the city in Centennial was looking, started our studies, one of the things that we looked at considering is establishing a density bonus program to increase construction, because we find that we often will build a structure with a huge parking lot, but that's not really what's needed. That huge parking lot could be for housing. If we're able to connect that development to transit, then people don't need the car so much. They don't have to be so reliant on the car. So that is one area that the city is looking at in some of the changes with the LDC, is to look at doing a density bonus program.
To nerd out very specifically, page 11 of Senate Bill 159, an allowable use for the loan fund is to finance energy improvements in affordable housing, which will provide funding for incremental upfront costs for efficient electrical measures and renewable energy systems for both existing buildings and new housing construction. And in the prioritization list, one of the priorities must be that they are highly energy efficient or use energy efficient electric equipment for space and water heating, blah, blah, blah. It is built into all of the bills we've been working on, is that energy efficiency, because the more energy efficient a place is, the lower the monthly costs for the people living there. So it is a key part of both protecting our environment and long-term affordability. Thank you.
All right, our next question came from Erica Salerno. It says, do we have any programs that help people who are in transition, going from one job to another, or whom are being displaced by divorce or forced out by landlords who raise rents too high for current tenants?
So the short answer is, within the task force, it was really about making sure that we are able to bring those from lower income and lower middle class into affordable, attainable options. That is kind of the main goal. Now, that was just one of 3 task force. Another one with a significant amount of funding is dedicated to mental health care. And having done work with a lot of homeless veterans, that is kind of where I come from, is working with veterans, homeless veterans. We found that a housing first model helps, with wraparound services around mental health care being another key part of it. So the second task force strictly was meeting around mental health care, and the third was around job creation. So when we're talking about individuals in transition, I really think that not only creating a stock of affordable attainable unit is going to help tend to that, but then you combine increasing services and funding around mental health care, and then also job training and job creation, I think is another part of it. So with that trifecta, I grew up Catholic, so everything happens in 3s, right? So with that trifecta, I think we're really going to see a lot of transformational changes. So that is the answer that that I'm putting forward. Is there anybody that wants to piggyback off that or discuss on the city level around homelessness and job development and job creation?
So yes, absolutely. And one thing that this area has been doing is really utilizing and collaborating with all sorts of nonprofits, as well as local government entities. I mentioned the Arapahoe County Department of Human Services, but we need to know where people are. We need to know how we can support them and link them. And that's consultation that's happening amongst the nonprofits. So somebody loses their job, who do we have case management and what we call wraparound support in social work, right? So that they're not being lost. And so we are treating them, not only the mental health piece, but the job piece and the job training piece and the support piece. Because remember, my friend that I met in the laundromat, when you don't have that mental health piece, you can't address anything else. It's very much Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's to David's point about, housing first as being so successful. And there are amazing groups, nonprofit groups in government that are helping these populations. So we just need to get them talking to each other. So, and those meetings are happening, and there might be some legislation changes to help us share information better, which I will be calling on David and Jeff to help support, hopefully down the road, so that we can do this better, so we can be more efficient, so we can help more people and not have to have them fill out so much paperwork. That is so exhausting, right? Like, no, it does not need to happen. Yeah, and we can help them quicker without them having to make phone call after phone call. And hopefully that's what's going to come down the pipeline. And it's already happening too.
Steve, did you still want to comment? Okay, all right. All right, our next question comes from Eleanor. It says, how can we create incentives for innovation in housing construction to radically reduce costs?
I love this question because one of the other bills that came from the Housing Interim Committee is this really cool bill that we're doing with OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, where we are incentivizing the construction of production facilities of the actual, the places that will build prefab housing. We are incentivizing folks to create that industrial sector here in Colorado. So we're going to help you set up your factory with some loans, maybe with some grants, but then you have to sell back to the state of Colorado, to people in the state at a discounted price. You have to basically sell back at cost. So we help you set up your very innovative prefab modular housing facility, but we get homes out of the whole deal. So it's jobs and it's affordable housing. It's a really, really cool system.
Wonderful. Our next question comes from Michael. It says, how can we ensure that this will create housing that is affordable, even for those not using government programs for affordable housing?
All right, so the answer the office came up with was SB 22-146. CHAFA Middle Income Access Program would address this, and this would also provide 25 million towards CHAFA's Missing Middle Program for middle income families that don't usually receive government assistance for affordable housing. So is there anybody else that wants to?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Ortiz. And I think the question is like, where does the rubber meet the road at the city level, at the district level? How does this affect your neighbors? And what does it mean to be in that missing middle and, accessing programs like this? Quite honestly, if you look at what our South Metro Housing Options has come up with, what a lot of our city staff that have been modifying our land use codes, we need housing stock in order to have this missing middle. And quite honestly, there's no other way about it that we do need to find more innovative ways to build and increase density throughout the city, not just necessarily small pockets here and there, sky rises and whatnot, but to increase gentle density. And I think all the programs that we have been talking about, whether that's manufacturer or prefab housing, a lot of folks are going to think, oh my gosh, we're going to turn the whole city into a trailer park or a sky rise. No, I mean, we need environmentally sustainable solutions that are matching the character and the feel of our city. And that can be done through these programs. And it can be done through increasing the gentle density of our single family residential zoned areas. But it's going to take a lot of nuance at the city by block level in order for that to happen.
No, I'll just say really quickly too, we are landlocked here in Littleton. So most of the, available land is either developed or is going to be developed. So these are some challenges that we're going to be facing. But I think with the creative city staff that we do have and South Metro Housing Options, I think we can get there, and your help.
I think Councilman Barr just coined a new phrase that we're going to be using. Oh, am I stealing your thunder? Let me back. Gentle density. That is, yeah.
I love this. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal it and use it as much as I can. It's fantastic. I haven't heard gentle density. I love that. I'll also say that this is in the grant program. The grant program is targeted for folks making in the metro area 80% of AMI or below. We have fought really hard on the loan program to maintain that 120% AMI and below, specifically because we know that there are still folks who make what many would consider an average wage, even a very good wage, who are struggling to afford housing here in the metro area. So we've kept that at 120, and in mountain resort communities, it will be even higher. We're working on how we're going to do that, but we're working on it. But we fought really hard to make sure that this is not just 80% and below, but really those middle income folks.
So I want to say thank you. I like this CHAFA program because in July, when the city started looking and getting their facts together about what was going on, it was pointed out to us that FHA loans, which is the way most people finance their house, that has a limit of $450,000. So we are now looking at homes median range in the South Metro area at over $600,000. So even for our people who make a good salary, they're still not able to afford it. So this CHAFA program with grants will come in and really support the people who want to get into home ownership.
Great. Our next question comes from Heather Greenwood, and I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out for Heather of thank you for everything you do at Graceful Cafe in downtown Littleton. But Heather's question is, how could we get local developers information, education, contacts with those in the affordable housing arena that understand tax credits and all the other factors that go into building or redeveloping property to qualify as affordable housing?
So thanks. That is a great question. And a lot of these bills, because that is something we considered, not just in the task force, but also when we're kind of putting this policy to paper and what we're going to be doing. So a lot of these bills do have a built-in marketing campaign so that local communities and nonprofits know what is available to them. It does no good if the community doesn't know what is out there at all whatsoever. So that's kind of baked into the cake, and that was on purpose.
Yeah, I was going to nerd out again and say page 13, section 7 of Senate Bill 159, publicizing the loan program. Specifically, they are supposed to work with SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, and the Minority Business Office that we created last year or the year before, specifically to make sure that folks across and rural counties and nonprofits that work with underserved and disadvantaged folks. So all of those are specifically and explicitly called out in the legislation. So we hear that concern and hopefully have already addressed it. And if you think we can buff this language up at all, take a look and let us know what we can do.
It's Candace again. So I just want to say that part of the fact and data gathering that we've been doing at the city is being involved in the Reimagine Housing Program, which is put on by the state. And that is one of the strategies that they talk about, is that we need to promote and develop. So when the developers come in and they say, hey, we'd like to have this development for this property, for these homes, we can start saying what our people need. So I again ask you all to go to the Centennial website during this public engagement period and make comments as to what you think we need in this area for housing.
Just real quick on that, a lot of people think that when they make public comments, it sort of goes into a black hole. I can tell you it is important. Reach out to us, send us emails, go on the website, get engaged. There are human beings who will read what it is that you send in.
Yep. A round of applause for my amazing staff who also, yeah, please. But also to piggyback on that, we at Team Ortiz have set up policy advisory committees. And so just to give you a window on what they do, one of the most active is the Healthcare Policy Advisory Committee, and it is most active because I do sit on the Healthcare Committee. And God bless y'all, if you're here, y'all know. I mean, some of y'all are up with me until 1 or 2 in the morning when we're hearing some of these bills around ivermectin or whatever that we obviously need to kill. And you know how I'm going to vote on it already, but you're still keeping me company. It's more than that, though. It's not just about keeping me company. It's about being the eyes and ears of the community and making sure our offices are informed on what is working and what needs to work better, whether that's the implementation of some of these policies and making sure that it's being advertised widely enough and deeply enough, or whether it's not. So I invite you to participate in those as well.
We could take more people in the housing committee just to let people know.
Yes, thank you, Joan.
Me too.
Yes.
So ask for more people to join us.
Thank you, Joan. I appreciate the shout out. Yes, I'll probably see you in the next couple of weeks then for our next meeting. Next question comes from Barbara, says, does the money allocated go to developers or individuals wanting to purchase housing?
Thanks for that question. I feel like we addressed parts of that. It is open to going to developers if they meet the strict criteria. This is not just going to be a blank check for them to do more of the same. That is not what we're doing here. But the bottom line is it is going to incorporate them because they have done the work. They know how to make these properties. They know how to develop these properties. And as long as they're going to meet the criteria to meet the transformational affordable housing stock, then they're welcome to participate among nonprofits and others. So.
Page 7. Lines 1, 2, and 3. An eligible recipient is a local government for-profit developer or community partner that applies through a loan to the program. Community partner is sort of the catch-all. We define it as anyone who works on the things that we are providing loans for. So this is meant to target, again, really a broad range of folks. We are excited about the ideas that are gonna come back from folks across Colorado. And part of what is, I think, one of my favorite pieces of the loan program is that it's competitive. And so the better plan you can come to us with, the more people you have engaged and involved, the more homes you're going to be able to build, the more affordable those homes are, the more likely it is that you are going to get the funds that you ask for. So we wanted to make sure that it was open and accessible because people in the state are creative. We're not dictating the terms of this. We're looking for good ideas.
I just wanted to really quickly speak to the subject because I know this is on the tops of a lot of folks' minds about developers and their role and how they play a role in interfacing with us as city government, with the state, and honestly what that ultimately means as to what actually gets built. These revolving loan fund programs actually give us options because right now, quite honestly, developers tend to be able to be the ones that can bring the capital to these projects, and we tend to be, I don't want to say at their mercy, but we have limited options as to what we can possibly ask for as a city. So when we're looking to hopefully put an inclusive housing ordinance in place, sustainability metrics on low water usage, low carbon footprint building materials and designs, innovative technologies integrated into the housing themselves, these are all great incentive programs, but unless we have a developer that we can actually bring to the table to actually get it built, it's never going to happen. Now, these revolving loan fund programs can actually be used by our city, by our nonprofits to say, all right, let's expand the vision of who we are including in this discussion. Let's expand who we are talking to. We don't and for the properties that have already been bought up in Littleton and have potential to actually be developed at this point, hey, now we have an incentive program rather than just asking the developer, hey, can you stick an X number of things on top? And when they say no, then we say, okay, well, we don't have the money as a city to do it either. These pots of money can actually allow us to leverage our local land use code requirements around sustainability and affordability to make sure these things actually get built rather than, again, just being at the whims of what happens.
So we're gonna have 30 seconds.
And I just want to add one other thing. In Centennial, we are using incentives to attract development. So some of the things that we talked about working even more so at that as a city, we could ask developers to do that infrastructure, that road that needs to be built, those sidewalks, that traffic signal. Water taps are very expensive here in Colorado to start building. So working out incentives for water taps and trying to reduce the fees that fall on municipalities, but yet talking with these developers and getting them to take on a lot of those building costs.
Right. Our next question comes from Anaya Robinson. And the question is SB 22-159, that's the revolving loan fund bill. It has a requirement of investment in one or more areas. One being, quote, housing specifically designed for people with disabilities, end quote. Is the intent of this language general around developments with the required percentage of ADA units, or specific to housing only for people with disabilities similar to senior housing? Is there any ability to amend the bill to increase the required percentage of units being made ADA accessible and affordable integrated housing when using this revolving fund?
Great, and shout out to Anaya. Great to see you in person and for that question. I addressed it a little bit. That is also going to be baked into the cake. And obviously, as somebody that lives with a mobility disability that requires a mobility device for access, the fact that the very landscape of the state capitol had to change because of my election, this is always on the forefront of my mind. So you better believe that that's always going to be something I bring to any bill that I'm on, even if I'm not on it, once it gets heard in front of me. So really appreciate that address. It was already addressed in the original draft, as you might be able to see right now, for refurbishing homes. But the bottom line is you will never have cheaper accessibility than when you build these in the first place. So that is also something that we're going to, through an amendment, bake into upfront when it comes to accessibility, because it's not just about refurbishing accessibility, it's about prioritizing it in a meaningful way and keeping it in mind. And it's not just for people like me that live with a disability, it's for our grandparents and parents. Bottom line, universal design is amazing that way. So whether you're 40 or whether you're 65 or 70, if it's accessible, it's going to be accessible. So I'm going to just go ahead because we're coming up on 2 and I really want to get to some of the note cards that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and read really quickly through some of the other questions that I have here before me. Since you are local representatives, will this measure influence the Littleton City Council to finally address the housing issue in Littleton, which includes homelessness as well? And second, how will the need be sold to citizens who may not be supportive? And so the answer that our office came up with is this is part of why we're having this town council is this town hall is to inform you the way city and state governments are working together to make sure we're addressing the issue, not just of the middle income or lower to around affordable housing option, but also around mental health care and around job development for those that will need those services, which contributes to our homelessness problem. Again, and this is based on experience having worked with veterans that are homeless. So I'll leave that there. We can contribute to it later. I don't want to, so let's keep going. What can be done to preserve housing for families and prevent/deter investors from outbidding local residents who want to put roots down in our community? So House Bill 22-1304 helps facilitate land ownership of the new homes that are being built. The money directed towards affordable housing will help to increase home ownership for those seeking affordable housing and would help those people establish roots in our community. Next question is, what is the role of impact fees on affordable housing? Should a nexus exist between the impact a project will have on infrastructure and the fee? So this is actually a question that we want to leave open and see if anybody from the city councils want to address that issue.
Hi, Carmine. As was mentioned, tap fees are an enormous part of the cost of initial build. And I've been fighting is probably the right word with water providers, Denver Water in particular, since I've been elected, to try and get some kind of nexus between predicted use and what is being charged for the tap fee. A tiny home is not going to use as much water as a McMansion, and they should not be charged the same amount for being hooked up to the city water supply. That is ongoing. We are looking at creating a housing committee that will continue to meet in the interim, and this will be one of the things that we look at. It's not just tap fees, it's all sorts of development fees. The lower that we can make those, the cheaper the final product will be. So working on it, have been working on it, continue working on it. It is amazing that the way that Denver Water is operating in the building, they're very strong, and we're just gonna, like water, continue going at them and eventually wear it down. So anyone else?
That's a really hard question for a municipality, but I will tell you that this is one of the strategies the city of Centennial has looked at. And one of the things that we've talked about is allowing a developer to have a small square foot residential unit, because less impact fees. smaller units. Because if someone's out there building a unit and they say, well, my minimum house size is 2,500 square feet, that's a good size home. And it's going to be expensive to put in all of the things to make that house affordable. So that's one of the things we're looking at, is asking developers to build smaller properties.
Candace, doesn't that mean changing zoning for a lot of areas? And that's
Yes.
where we have the problem.
Well, in the sense that not so much. Thank you, Joan. In the sense that you have in our city, we have zoned residential areas and we have the flexibility to change zoning. We can go, if it needs to happen, we can do that. We have that flexibility to go before and say, we would like to change the zoning. So it's not that in a residential area, a house can only be built at 2,500 feet. It's because that builder thinks, I can build the McMansion and it will sell. So we're working in essence with the builders to try to change some of the ways that they look at selling homes. We pride ourselves in Centennial on being a neighborhood of homes, but right now it's not a neighborhood of affordable homes. Okay.
All right, questions from the crowd now.
Yeah. All right. So how will these housing solutions address immigrants, i.e. language barriers, lack of documentation?
So I know we have champions that are building some of that into some of these bills. Also during our budget process, there are amendments coming forward, and I can speak to two. I call her Jefita for those that don't know what that means. It means the boss. Representative Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez has brought forward that is going to seek increasing the defense fund, the legal defense fund for migrants. I know that Representative Carrie Tipper, who's also one of our amazing Latina leaders in the House, is bringing forward a bill that is going to make sure that if migrants are putting in a guilty plea just because they're being kind of coerced into it and they don't have legal defense fund to be able to do it, it's going to allow them to challenge that guilty plea in the first place, among others. So there are champions within the House and the Senate. I gotta call out Senator Julie Gonzalez for the work that she does as well, that are making sure that when it comes to our migrants and refugees, that we're creating a welcoming environment for them too. I mean, what's going on right now in Ukraine kind of crystallizes, and then what had happened before around Afghanistan crystallizes why we need to be a welcoming place for those that need it the most. I'm first generation American myself, and I'm very proud of that fact. I will stack up my family's contributions to this nation against anybody that has been here for generations. So this is definitely something that we're tending to and that we're working on.
Great. Could you please comment on rent control aspects of House Bill 1287 and House Bill 1304 as it will apply to local affordable for sale housing and support land banking?
I don't believe that rent control applies to for sale housing. So, because it's for rent. Can we get a little more specificity on that question?
It's in the portion about mobile housing conversions, rent control, 3% rent control cap.
Oh, yeah.
So really, I have not nerded out on that specific bill to the extent. So we will keep that question, and that'll be one of those warrant officer answers that we will definitely get back to you and kind of write something out, and not just give it to you answer. We'll look to put it in our newsletter too, so the entire community can be aware of the answer for the question you asked. So we appreciate that.
The concept of rent control.
That is not an area that I'm well versed in, to be honest. I know that I tend to shy away from rent control. Just that's me personally. I'm not opposed to good ideas though. And if someone can show that it is effective, then I will always be open to hearing about it. I see Senator Newell raising her hand. So even though she's not a part of this panel, I'm going to pass it on to her. For the individuals online, do you mind?
I'm not in office anymore. I'm not in office anymore, so I can easily say this and they can't. It'll never happen in Colorado. I'll just say it that way.
I'll add to that, and because I step in it all the time anyway, and I'm not afraid to do so. The data that I have seen has been mixed. I won't say it has been, it's not sort of like, it's not that it's unclear, it's that it is really clearly proving it works and really clearly proving it doesn't work and not really clearly showing when or why. And so until I tend to govern based on data, that's a crazy place to be. I tend to govern based on a combination of data and values, right? Like I have really clear values, and as we want to execute on those values, we want to build a Colorado that has opportunity. We need data in order to get us there. So the data so far that I have seen has been very mixed on that. Always open to more data. If anyone has a research study for me, peer reviewed is generally the best. I believe I'm the only senator that has brought peer reviewed data to a committee hearing before, and I won. So.
All right, so I believe this was mentioned when Kelly Milliman first spoke, but how do you help address the sentiment of not in my backyard?
Oh, yes.
It's going to start with all of you in this room, right? You're going to have to be our ambassadors to help destigmify like renters and people of color and diversity, and the work's going to fall to all of us as a community to address it and not be afraid to say words like density. That's why they were joking about gentle density, right? Because we can be tar and feathered if we mention that in some places. This is a complicated issue. And I want to actually hear from Kelly too, because Kelly has some thoughts on this one.
Okay, Kelly, before I pass the mic, I just want to say a few things that, once again, please go and give us your comments on the website. We need to hear from you. If you're a NIMBY fan, we need you to say why. We need to understand when people say not in my backyard, what is their objection? Why do they not want a certain type of development? We have to start thinking, and I use the royal we here, we have to start thinking about being totally inclusive about housing. We have to start thinking that we want people to have housing stability and to be able to grow up their families in neighborhoods with roots where they can connect to their teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the law enforcement. Getting rid of that thing about, she grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. We don't need divisions anymore because our world in total has become so global that we really do not know what other people are bringing to the table, to this country, because we just don't know. And isn't it a lovely surprise when you find out that your next door neighbor can help you in some little way or some large way? So once again, let us know on that website if you have objections to certain housing. You're not going to be criticized. We just want to know. And then that way we can figure out how to meet people's needs.
So Candace, the city of Littleton over the last couple of years had a very robust conversation amongst its community, our community members. Around updating our comprehensive plan and our land use code. And out of that conversation, it was clear that inclusivity is a very important value of our community. The people are what make this community. I always say not the buildings, it's the people. That's what makes our community. So yeah, it's a very hard conversation. Change is hard. I've said that before. Change is always hard, but it can be good. And in order to keep a vibrant sustained economy in our city, we have to grow. The region is growing, the country is growing. We can't stop it. We could stop it. We could put up the walls. We could say no more development. And then what do we turn into? A very, very, very expensive community. We don't want that here in Littleton. I don't want that here in Littleton, not for myself or my kids. So I think that's it. So yes, come and talk to us if you need any ideas about what we heard when we were in those discussions about our land use codes and changing those codes, which again, were from the 1970s. And we've changed as a community, just as the Littleton of 1870 has changed. So thank you.
I don't want to let this question go without speaking to the climate crisis and the environmental sustainability factors that we are facing as a country. And so much of that has to do with how we live and how we get to where we're going every day. You know, putting up the walls has kind of been business as normal. And so the NIMBYism that has existed over the course of multiple decades has resulted in suburban sprawl that now stretches into the distance and is taking away from the things that people love about Colorado, the open space, the wildlife, the things that we truly treasure. Accepting the fact that we can increase gently increase density throughout our metro areas allows us to preserve the things that we love about living here. It allows us to not spend 2 hours a day in our car trying to get to and from work, which decreases the air pollution, which increases our lifespan and our overall health. I mean, so much of what we are doing environmentally speaking is tied to our housing choices. That I just didn't want to let that go. So for those that are saying not in our backyard, that solution, that has not worked. We are seeing the effects of this in Louisville. You can talk to them as they are battling wildfires. And if you think that's a one-off event, just wait till we start spreading housing further and further into these foothills, and you will see what the tragic human result is going to be battling this crisis. So.
And I would just say too, you know, we need housing of all sorts here in Littleton, not just affordable housing, but we need all kinds of housing. Housing for seniors that are aging in place. Like, who was that? Candace said that you're in a single family home and you can't find another place to move. It's the same with me and my husband. So we need housing of all sorts. And we have a unique opportunity here in Littleton because we have 2 light rail stations here in town. And so creating, having those opportunities to create housing around those light rail stations, I think it's a really good win-win for us as well, whether it's affordable or not. It is housing, so.
Diverse communities are stronger communities, whether that's age, race, income, perspective. Diverse communities are stronger communities, and we should all value that. And for folks that don't, like, knock on their doors, have the conversations. We need to go out there and persuade folks.
And I'll just piggyback off that statement because that's also a value that I have. And my stark example is look at World War II. It was the Tuskegee Airmen. It was Alan Turing, a gay man that broke the German code. It was the Navajo code talkers. It was the most, I'm forgetting spacing the unit, but the all AAPI unit that's, oh, by the way, the most decorated unit in military history, coming together to take down one of the greatest evils in the world. Our diversity has always been and will always be our greatest source of strength, period. All right, we are about 3 minutes to 2. We are going to take the questions that we were not able to answer publicly. We will make sure we get them answers individually, but also post them in our newsletter so that your community can appreciate the questions that you asked. I'm going to allow all the city council members to do closing comments, say thank you, whatever they want to here in these last few minutes. So let's start with Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great Saturday.
Anybody else want to give a thank you and a shout out to everybody?
Thank you. You all are awesome. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday.
Thank you. This has been wonderful to see everybody. Let's keep it up.
That's it. Thank you. Go home.
If you provided us a question, but you did not leave your name on it, please come to me so we can make sure that we can get that answered for you and I can follow up with you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, really,